We always felt really grateful to grow up in a country that accepts us for who we are, but not every country is as open and progressive. So does that mean that we should never travel to those places?
In case you haven't noticed, we're a same-sex couple. So we got married in Toronto all the way back in 2008. In fact, today, the very day that we're recording this video, is our 13-year anniversary, if you can believe it. So in our time together, we lived in 2 countries and we traveled all over the world.
We know that so many LGBT people want to see more of the world but have real concerns about their safety. And then it becomes a trade-off. Do you stick with the gay-friendly destinations? Then you might just end up touring around Western Europe again and again.
Or do you take a risk and head out into other parts of the world that do have a lot to offer but might not be as progressive?
So in this video, we're going to be sharing what it's like to travel the world as a same-sex couple and whether we find it to be safe, especially in parts of the world where LGBT people have few rights or maybe no rights at all.
But first, hello from High Park in Toronto and welcome back. So if you're new around here, I'm Stephanie, this is Gillian. We retired early to travel full time, and if you're looking for more adventure, you can subscribe for a new video every Sunday.
The story of our travels begins right here in Canada. We're both from Toronto and we met and we got married here, and we were very fortunate to have the support for our relationship from our family and friends and even our workplaces.
Gillian even got a congratulations card from all of her colleagues, and she was working in the Canadian military at the time, so that's how progressive Canada is.
So if you've watched any of our videos, you'll know that we've always loved to travel. Back then, we'd take one big trip a year, but eventually we felt those 2 weeks just weren't enough.
We thought that maybe our careers might be the ticket to more travel. So if we could both land jobs overseas, then we would have a whole new part of the world to explore.
After doing a lot of research, we decided on Singapore as the best destination for growing our careers. It's an English-speaking country, so we saw it as a much easier option versus other countries in Asia. And in the beginning, that's about all we knew about Singapore. We were hard-pressed to even find it on a map.
And surprise, after months of networking and interviews, I actually got offered a job. And Gillian was also really close to landing one. This was our big opportunity, so it was gonna be the adventure of a lifetime.
There was just one tiny little issue.
It's such a small issue, so small.
Singapore doesn't recognize gay marriage. In fact, LGBT people have very few rights at all, certainly no workplace protections. So right away, this meant that we wouldn't be moving to Singapore as a couple, we'd be moving as 2 individuals, and we'd both need to land jobs in order to stay in the country.
So just to really quickly put this in context, when a heterosexual couple moves to Singapore, just one person needs to have a job. The spouse can come on a dependent pass and then look for work at their leisure. For us, we both needed a job right away. Gillian didn't have one yet, so she was actually only allowed to stay in Singapore for 30 days on a tourist visa.
The move to Asia was starting to feel a lot more risky, but we wanted to take a chance and have the adventure. So we started our new life in Singapore by going straight into the closet. Now, we never outright lied to anyone.
I fully lied to people all the time.
But our personal lives just became a topic that we never really spoke about.
Even after we got to know our colleagues pretty well, we were very careful about oversharing. When we settled in Singapore, we quickly discovered that it's a very traditional society. On the whole, people were much more family-oriented and much more religious than what we experienced back in Canada. And it's also important to mention that we never really saw it as our job to educate other people. We were guests in the country, and we never wanted to impose our way of thinking or our views on everyone else. Especially once I started working in the financial services industry, which was one of the most conservative in an already very conservative country. Anyway, our real priority was to be traveling, and we did a lot of it. And eventually we'd explored the whole region, but we were ready to finally step it up. We wanted to travel the world, and we wanted to do it on a full-time basis.
We got started putting together the first few legs of our itinerary, and we realized that we'd be going through some countries that just weren't gay-friendly. Poland, Ukraine, Turkey. We weren't sure how safe it would be to travel to these countries as a female couple. Of course, we'd grown accustomed to flying under the radar while living in Singapore all those years, but still, what happens when we rent an Airbnb with just one bed? Would we need a cover story? We seriously considered passing ourselves off as cousins if we were asked about our relationship. But it turned out that none of our Airbnb hosts really cared, Or if they did, they certainly never said anything. Our fears about that were overblown. Either the hosts were fairly worldly because they're exposed to lots of international tourists, or they didn't want anything getting in the way of the business transaction.
Of course, that's just inside our Airbnb. So what about when we're out exploring a new destination? How do people react to us on the street or at a restaurant as a same-sex couple? And quite frankly, unless we tell them, they likely wouldn't know. When we're out and about, we limit those public displays of affection. So you really wouldn't know that we're a couple. It would be easy to assume that we're just really, really good friends. Now, some people might say that I shouldn't have to change my behavior because I'm in another country, and we get it. It's just that we see this as being respectful of local customs. So just like when we lived in Singapore, we're guests in the country. We're not there to make a political statement or educate the locals. In fact, in many countries, even opposite-sex couples are discouraged from those public displays of affection.
We also follow basic safety practices wherever we go. We tend not to go out at night. We definitely don't go to bars and nightclubs, and we've always got our 2 little guard dogs along with us who will bite an ankle if it really comes down to it. All of this doesn't address another important issue though, and that's whether we're basically supporting governments that suppress people's rights. This is probably the part of travel that we struggle with the most. But if we stuck with countries where we agree with all their policies, our travel list would be very short. There are just so many countries in the world that are well behind in this area. Instead, we try to make a difference with our charitable donations. Whenever we see a social issue that really bothers us, we donate to a local organization that's trying to make a change. It's a small thing, but it's something.
By now, we've traveled to over 40 countries, and we've never had any concerns about our safety. And honestly, many of those countries have politics that we really don't agree with. So we might not decide to make a home there, but we've still found the experience to be really worthwhile.
In the end, we feel the trade-off is worth it. Yes, sometimes we visit countries where not everyone's treated equally, but we can still learn a lot from the people and the culture.
We've discovered that even though a country's official policies might say one thing, it doesn't mean that you can't make connections with the locals.
Looping back to our Singapore experience, even though it's a very conservative country, we made lots of local friends. Some of them were gay, some of them weren't, but they were all very open and accepting of our lifestyle.
Despite going into the closet at work, living in Singapore was a life-changing experience. So we've decided not to hold back on visiting countries just because of the politics.
We travel carefully, we make educated choices, and in return, we get to see parts of the world that we wouldn't otherwise experience.
Of course, being a same-sex couple isn't the only challenge that we face as full-time travelers. Really, the life of a traveler isn't that easy. Over the past year, we've had canceled flights, lost luggage, way too many COVID tests. So if you want the scoop on what our life of travel is really like, you can check out our latest Q&A video right here.